Sunday morning.
Happy Sunday,
And
or whatever day you're listening on.
Lazy Sunday. And we're at episode 3. The Bitcoin episode.
The official Bitcoin episode. Thank you for your patience in letting us get here. Took a couple, but we wanted to do right by you, the listener, because this is not an easy topic.
No, it was important to set up the foundation of why we're here.
Where are we this morning? Let's start there. Where are we at? Sunday. It's in the AM. We're caffeinated. That's nice. Wearing some new apparel. Seeger brand.
Let us introduce our outfits this
Repping
morning.
the brother-in-law. Seeger Western Company. Check them out. Not sponsored, but gotta help out the family. You know, where possible.
And a backstory on what I'm wearing this morning. So
what is the backstory?
Every year on my birthday, I pick a theme. It's very important.
It is very important.
The theme is important. And Taylor and family buy me a cake or gifts around that theme.
Yes.
I have had many themes, and I'm not ashamed of my themes. They have been Kung Fu Panda.
I think Kung Fu Panda or Cars, those two in particular, have taken
I'm
the
going to
cake,
flash a picture
so
of the
to
Kung
speak.
Fu Panda cake.
Yeah, the Kung Fu
Although
Panda cake was
Hannah's
pretty great.
Monsters Inc. cake,
The Monsters Inc. cake.
that was incredible.
Yeah, or
See,
my
I'm already
Deadpool
getting
cake,
excited
actually.
talking about,
Yeah.
oh, your Deadpool.
Yeah.
So we have themes. This year's theme was dragons.
Dragons.
I know every person and their mom is reading Fourth Wing. We have motored through those books. To be
If
fair,
you
I'm
haven't
still,
plugged for Fourth Wing,
yeah.
fantasy series, get behind it. It's great. It's wildly
hilarious.
violent. A lot of
You'll
mature
find yourself
content, we'll say.
laughing,
Yes.
alone, laughing.
But had to get you a Fourth Wing sweatshirt.
Check it out.
Bazgaiath.
Well, you can come
Bazgaiath War College.
I am wearing I'm wearing a dragon sweatshirt today.
Because
with
you
dragons
can.
up my sleeve.
You know? And not just in your own house,
And
but you're
it's
wearing that
so
baby out.
comfortable.
For sure.
Yeah, I wore it out in public yesterday. Anyway, so that's why I'm wearing a dragon sweatshirt.
We're doing that.
We read. I was never a big reader, and then I discovered that
If
if
it's
you
not-
like the book, you read it.
If it's not Bitcoin content, it's dragon content. It's like the reality of our world right now.
Anyway,
Shameless plug for Fourth Wing.
yeah,
and
Sundays.
Seeger.
Yeah, and I'm also a huge fan of Harrison Ford. So
Yeah, there you
my
go.
homage mug. But we're gonna dive into Bitcoin today, and I have deemed myself the moderator. I've taken on the brave task of being our chairperson of this episode. There's a lot of noise out there around the topic. I'm sure you've heard a lot of vocab words you don't understand, and we're here to clear them up today. But we're gonna start at the top, work our way through, just like our previous episodes. We're gonna give you what we hope you walk away with today. Would you like to enlighten them on that?
Top 3. So I think at the highest level, we're going to talk about what is Bitcoin. So leaving this episode, you should have at least a practical knowledge of what the thing is. So that again, in a random circumstance such as discussing Bitcoin over coffee, you would be able to reasonably discuss it. It's like, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about some of the more important aspects that are, we'll say, intrinsic to Bitcoin, things like mining, things like proof of work, decentralization, some of the terms that we've thrown around in the earlier episodes, but sort of their specific application to Bitcoin.
Cool.
And then I think we will also get into some of the, how would I say this? Get into some of the like gotcha questions that people typically ask
I like
around
that.
Bitcoin. So
Mhm.
like, what about supercomputers and like
Yeah.
what's going to happen? So we'll kind of address those like hot topics towards the end. But I think those are our 3: practical knowledge, some of the more nuanced topics, and then finally some of the hot topic bits. But
Love
we'll
it.
see how long it takes.
Okay.
That's something, by the way, we've learned, I think, in having a dialogue over the podcast. You have the intent of making it short and sweet. I think we could sit here for 2 hours, 2.5 hours sometimes.
I agree. But it's fun.
It is fun.
Yeah.
Okay, where do we
We're
begin?
having a lot of fun. All right, I want to do a quick recap of our last episode of just making sure, in case you didn't watch it, but this is where we're entering from. We're entering from last time we talked about the Federal Reserve and how they're distributing new money. They have their hand on the printing button. We discussed what's good money, what's bad money, and broken money. And we arrived at the conclusion, along with many other experts that the dollar is broken. And we went over the reasons why. Hopefully you followed along and you learned something new, but you understand how we got here and why we're looking at the light of Bitcoin and how this could be the best money ever invented. But what is Bitcoin? Enter you.
Enter me. Okay. So I think there's two ways to answer this question. If I really only had a single sentence, if someone again were to ask that over coffee or over dinner, what is Bitcoin? I think the shortest two words is digital gold. Literally the shortest way I can phrase it. We talked about good money and gold in a previous episode, but this is the digital version of gold. Pretty much the simplest version. There's like a part 2 to that where how would we explain the utility of that? Peer-to-peer electronic cash, I think, would be the next, right? So it's like 2 words, then we're getting like slightly larger. So people understand the utility of cash, being able to like move money back and forth. There's like that aspect to it. But that's it at its basic form.
I loved this. So when I read peer-to-peer cash, digital cash, that light bulb, I understood that because if you think about cash, right? As people, you'd get $1. We've always had cash dollars.
Yep.
And you were able to verify with your eyes and your hands, this is a dollar bill.
Yes.
I trust what I'm using is the real deal, and this is it. Well, then in the last 20 years, we've clearly moved into a digital landscape. We are a digital people now.
Where you're checking your phone and looking at your bank account, or you're looking at a series of numbers, but it's not represented as like a physical object you can touch.
Exactly.
Right.
So how do you verify that?
Right.
Pre-Bitcoin, I need to verify. I can't verify it with my hands and my eyes, so I need to verify it. How do I verify it? Well, we have third parties. We have banks. We have credit card companies. We have PayPal. We trust to verify that that is the number in our bank account, that they are the keepers of the information, that they're the verifiers, which makes sense because we went from being able to do it ourselves. It's no longer physical. It's now digital. How do we do it digitally? It sounds complicated. So there's third parties that help us. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
It's in a great nutshell. And I do want to throw out that this concept of like a third party, like a bank, being the person that is ultimately verifying your funds.
Yeah.
For a very long time, that centralization in a way has been how would I phrase this? It's been successful. It's been appreciated. Like, right? Like you and I like are sitting here going like, all right, our money's sitting in a bank, and there's sort of a supposed peace and calm that comes over when you're like, it's not sitting here on the floor like, oh man, we better really take care of this thing. There's sort of like, right, you're sort of outsourcing not only the verification of the security.
It's kind of like when we take Gus to the kennel and we're going on vacation and we have true peace of mind because
our dog
Gus
is gold.
Loves the kennel, and he is a form of gold for us. But I know when I'm on vacation and if Gus is secure in the kennel and their staff and they're taking care of him and they're making sure he's good, I'm not thinking about Gus during the day. I love him. And I know he exists, and I know he's safe because I trust the people taking care of him, but he's off over here in a vault in Aliso Viejo while I'm enjoying myself.
So the reason I bring this up, and I actually really, I was totally going to miss this, so I'm glad you brought up that like verification being sort of an important part of today's banking system and how we use cash.
Yeah.
So then if I were you, the listener on the other side, and you're going, cool, digital gold, peer-to-peer cash, I already have a bank account, I already have Venmo, right? I'm already able to easily transact and move money around. And as you said, Taylor and Haley, I already have this third party, they're verifying this for me. I feel good about this in general, right?
Yes.
So then why innovate? Why shift to something like Bitcoin?
Yeah.
I know we've said this a lot already on a couple of the first episodes, but we will do an episode on one of our favorite movies, The Big Short. For those that are maybe haven't seen the movie, The Big Short covers the global financial crisis or the housing crisis that occurred in the 2009 era. It talks about a number of investors who were able to identify that there was a really big problem with housing, and they were able to short the market, thus sort of making a good sum of money in doing so. But the movie itself is really helpful because it unpacks the larger problem of like, well, how did we even get there with the housing crisis problem? And this is where, I'm going to come back to your point on verification having a third party. What's the
Yes.
problem? Until we get to that episode, you're going to have to trust me on some of the basics here. But the short version is banks themselves started getting a little greedy. They started maybe not being so discerning in who they gave mortgages to. They created financial instruments, mortgage-backed securities or mortgage bonds, where they then took those bonds, sold them to municipalities, school districts, where again 401ks, pensions, retirements were buying a lot of those financial products. Suffice to say, the financial products themselves weren't good. But because at the time, no one was, the economy is soaring right now. This is 05, 06, 07, kind of going up and to the right. The, housing market's doing really well. People can get loans to buy anything. It's just sort of this like amazing, seemingly amazing moment. But it's due to the fact that there were these banks that were able to take funds and use them in, we'll say, less than satisfactory standards that led to then going, we sold bad bonds.
Yep.
We weren't as good at verifying funds and things like that in order to allow people to make some pretty big purchases like homes and things of that nature. And what did that lead to? It led to a financial collapse of not just the housing market, but the global financial system, because there was so much money in that. And so many individuals at the time lost value virtually overnight, again, value of their retirement funds, 401ks, because those funds themselves were so heavily invested in this.
Yeah.
The reason I'm bringing this up is that third party, that bank, may not always be acting in your best interest. And I'm going to take, even though in this community of Bitcoin and things like that, there's a lot of really, really good reason to point fingers and call fraud and call BS on how banks operate. I'm going to try and stay as objective as possible.
Yeah.
And we'll even assume that there was no malicious intent at that point in time. Oops, they just made a mistake. But in some ways, that could even be worse, because it means that you have this third party that was behaving in a negligent fashion. So me as a person who's like giving my money to the bank and saying, hey, I really hope you're taking care of this, right? Ooh, man. So all this, now we're going to come back to the Bitcoin episode, why it's here. Trusting a third party has been a huge part of our financial ecosystem. It's how it all has worked, right? Since even gold was established and needing to put it into a vault, like banks as third parties played a big role. So coming back to what is Bitcoin, and perhaps there were a number of folks in that 2009 era that watched the banks behave poorly, and then all of this value disappear from people's hard-earned savings. They said, what's the alternative, right? And so a individual or a group of people under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto came up with Bitcoin. And so in that 2008, 2009 era, this individual, or again, group, Satoshi, we're just going to refer to them moving forward, wrote what's called a white paper. This was kind of the era where you could put some ideas out on the internet and then get some people to reply back.
Yeah.
And I just want to read the start of the white paper. It's not long, by the way. You can go on Google and just type in Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, and this will come up. But this is the abstract, and so this is sort of the little summary at the top. And it reads, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. I'll pause there, because I think that's really what this is. There was a problem with the banks. Someone goes, you know what? I don't want to have to trust a third party in order to move quote unquote money around. And thus, that's where this idea of Bitcoin came from. And then shortly after, 2009, that's where Bitcoin was officially launched. So, take a breath right there. So, you, the listener, you're on the other side. You're kind of like, I get it. Digital gold, peer-to-peer electronic cash. That makes sense. Some random group in response to the financial crisis or global housing crisis said, you know what, we're not really that into banks right now, and so we're going to create an alternative. And so just to express the value of that alternative, like what might be the benefit of not using a third party to transact, it means that with no central authority, it means that no one is there to inflate, to manipulate, or restrict that flow of cash. I'm going to say those 3 words again. Inflate, manipulate, or restrict. So
inflate, manipulate, or restrict.
last couple episodes, especially around inflation, we talked about how not so great when a bank, or in this case, U.S. Central Bank, can inflate currencies, right? Manipulate's interesting, more around, again, similar like interest rates, cost of money, or even movement of money, or restrict, like, right? Hey, maybe an individual or that third party blocking your ability to send cash, send money in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I think that's where, like, right there, just at the base level, practical knowledge, digital gold or peer-to-peer electronic cash.
Yep.
But the real big shift from today's model is we're removing that third party in the middle.
Yep.
No trusted third party. It's a trustless system that operates, and that's where we're kind of now getting into the principles of money. So hopefully, for those, even without all the other stuff we're going to cover in this episode, you go, okay, that's intriguing, right? We're not going to yet take the naysayer approach or glass half empty approach just yet. Okay. We're saying, that's interesting. That's an interesting utility because we're potentially removing some risk from the system from that third party.
Yep.
Okay. You're the moderator though. Where are we going next?
Now that you kind of understand the high level, like you just described, let's get into a little bit more of the technical side.
Okay.
Because I feel like once I understood the high level, I wrapped my arms around it. That started to make sense. This is where my eyes started to go cross. And I'm actually still in this exploration of becoming someone who can say this without written assistance.
Right.
But let's start to touch on the new vocab and how Bitcoin functions.
How it works.
On a technical level.
How does Bitcoin work?
Yep.
Right? Okay. So I want to first put us in a common situation, which would be, let's say you need to pay a friend for, or pay your mortgage. Okay, you need to pay your mortgage, right? So we have a bank account with money in it.
Yep.
And the bank has an account and it's waiting for our money, right? So, of course, many ways we'll write the bank a check. But in today's day and age, you probably log into whoever your banking institution is, and you say, okay, here's my mortgage amount of money that I'm going to send, and you push send, right? And it leaves your bank account and goes to another.
Yep. So,
not even in an abstract sense, in a very real sense, all that's occurred is in the digital world of money. A ledger was updated. Digitally speaking, there's like again, big old computer server out there, and it's going, oh, look, there's a transaction that's occurred. I'm going to take, X thousand out of Taylor and Haley's account. I'm going to reduce the total money that's in there. I'm going to move it into the bank's account where it now is X thousand richer because they paid their mortgage, right?
So if you were to define ledger, can you define ledger? Because I think that is one of those words that let's just put it up on the side. Ledger is a...
Well, I'm going to pause. What would you say a ledger is?
Well, I touched on it in the Stones of Yap section last episode, but I would say that a ledger is simply put, a list of the history of transactions that have occurred.
A record of transactions. I think that's super fair.
Record.
You could even think of it like a notebook. It's a notebook, and in that notebook is a record of all the transactions. How much money moved from source bank account to destination bank account. Or I didn't even say bank, account to account.
Correct.
Account to account. Okay? So all Bitcoin is effectively a ledger. Again, I like to think of it like the notebook because I think that makes sense in the easiest sense. And all we're doing is recording transactions in a ledger, the same way that a bank would. This is where one of the words that I know you were going to bring up is around a decentralized nature of it.
Yes.
Okay. So if I'm a listener on the other end right now and I'm thinking, okay, Bitcoin is a ledger. It's right similar to a notebook where transactions are recorded, where I'm sending cash back and forth. Why is it better? What's better than a bank in doing so? So the first thing is that this ledger is open source. So right now you could go on the interwebs and download the Bitcoin ledger, right? Which is again that entire history of all Bitcoin transactions that have ever occurred, and you could quote unquote run that ledger and run the Bitcoin protocol on your computer. And so in doing so, you're creating what's called a Bitcoin node. This is where we're getting into some of that terminology here, but it just means that you're running a copy of the ledger. And the reason this starts to add both utility and value to the Bitcoin ecosystem, to the Bitcoin network, is because it's these little copies that are running in different destinations. So it increases the probability that there's multiple copies of the transactions, right? There's not a centralized source of transactions.
There's no one source of truth.
No one source of truth. There are many sources of truth. As we said, thousands.
Yeah, thousands.
Tens of thousands of sources of truth.
We said like 25,000.
Right? So we're decentralizing it, and there's benefit in that in multiple copies, and if you try and change the ledger. Let's say there was a bad actor out there. They wanted to be like, I'm gonna do some bad things, and I'm going to try and convince someone that I have more money than I actually have, or I want to move money I don't have maybe to an account I control, right? I'm a bad actor. I'm gonna do some fraud. You would have to update that ledger in all, or at least the majority of ledgers out there, right? So it becomes harder and harder and harder to change the information over a period of time. It's what makes Bitcoin immutable in a way.
What does it immutable mean?
Meaning once a transaction is recorded, it can't be changed. So I'm going to pause there for a second. We know Bitcoin, digital gold, peer-to-peer electronic cash. We know that it doesn't involve a third party. I'm like, okay. Starting to shake our head. That makes sense.
Yep.
One of the first big things, though, of like really what is Bitcoin, is just a ledger. It's just all it is a record of transactions of how much of a thing moved from one account to another. And part of the beauty of this Bitcoin ledger is it's not stored in one place. It's stored in multiple places because any individual can run Bitcoin. And the benefit in that decentralization is there's no one copy of the ledger. There's multiple copies of it. And if you ever try to change it, you have to change it on a majority of the ledgers, 51% of them. And that's really, really, really hard to do. So you're starting to get some value from that decentralization. It's harder and harder to shift or change or conduct fraud on in that way. But I'm going to pause there. It's just a ledger. That's all it is.
I love that. I am totally following, and I think you did a great job.
You're so nice to me. You got to tell me when I do bad jobs, too. You'd be like, no, pause, go backwards.
Pause means bad job. Yeah, I don't have any pauses. I think
you don't have any pauses? You don't have any questions on that?
I mean, the one thing, this is getting in the nitty gritty. I tend to, and I so appreciate when you're like, that's not a part of the bigger picture. When you say Bitcoin is a ledger, I think that's a bit confusing. Bitcoin is a ledger because I have cash and I have a bank and there's a ledger in between that's recording the transactions between the cash between two people.
Right.
But Bitcoin is a ledger. Now that may be getting too granular. That statement is the only one I got hung up on.
That's fair. Because you could also say like, wait a minute, I thought Bitcoin was peer-to-peer cash. Like, right? You're okay.
Yeah.
That's very fair. So perhaps to pull the nose of the plane up a little bit.
Yeah.
It is fair to call out that there's something called the Bitcoin protocol. And then the monetary object that protocol produces is what we commonly refer to as Bitcoin.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. So again, I can go online and I can go to insert website and I can download the Bitcoin protocol to run on my computer. And that protocol is a ledger of all Bitcoin transactions that have gone back and forth. And there are some other pieces like wallets that we'll get into here in a second to like really start to put the puzzle pieces together. But they are in some ways they are different objects, right? You have the ledger itself where you're writing all the transactions down, the protocol, and then there's the monetary unit that is then provided or issued into the system that is Bitcoin. That's the object, like the thing that we're like, ooh, that's the thing that has value, right? That's the monetary.
You can almost stop there so we don't
Yes.
fork into a topic that's
Fork into a topic.
pun intended. That's all I wanted to make sure that everyone knew, that there is a Bitcoin as a ledger is one statement, which is true, but there is a reward, which is the Bitcoin, which we'll get into. But I just want to make sure that that was clear, that there's a separation.
There is. Where do we go next?
Let's see. Where do we go next? Okay. So we talked about what makes it decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think what I was going to talk about earlier is relevant.
Okay.
Do you?
Sure. Up to you.
Well, sure. I'll give it a try. Bear with me. Another book that I really think strings what we're talking about in written form together. This is a really great book. I know we plugged Larry's book last time. And if this episode grabs you, I would grab this next. It is called Inventing Bitcoin by Jan Pritzker. We will link it in the show notes below. That worked last time. I know how to do that now.
I have gifted this book to so many people.
Probably 40 books you've ordered.
I've read a lot of Bitcoin books.
Yeah.
This, in my opinion, is the best holistic picture, both explaining kind of like some of the sources of good money, kind of the core problem with like central banks and those pieces, then getting into this thing called a Bitcoin ledger, and then like actually how it's mined, like, and it's a pretty quick read.
I agree. It's only 96 pages, and I really value when things are objective.
Yeah. Jan does a great job.
I get pricked pretty easy, I think, and this one's so objective. This is kind of inspired the approach in The Newsroom, another show if you haven't watched it, of presenting both sides of an argument, but really just, I don't think there's a ton of opinion in here. It's very nuts and bolts. Anyway, there is a passage that I really liked on describing what decentralization is, and that this isn't necessarily a new idea, but it is new to money.
Right.
Is that correct?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Aren't you the expert? You're my human Google. But I liked how he brought up examples in the past. Like I mentioned before, I love history, and history helps me string things together. I'm resistant to change. Technological change sometimes scares me, but you're here to guide me sometimes. AI, quantum computing, all of these big terms. I mean, I like to sit outside and look at the birds. So history grounds me, and I liked hearing decentralization in history that has really contributed to the evolution of society, and really good things have come out of it. So this I really liked. So decentralization happened with the printing press, and it was the decentralized production of information.
So hold on, meaning that way back when, before there was a printing press, when there was some information in a village, and you needed to get it out to the world, word of mouth was really the only way that that happened.
Or you had to write individual copies.
Right.
Oh no, Taylor, alarm.
We're good.
And so it would take a long time. Also, what if you... Anyway, yes, the printing press made...
Well, it then decentralized that information, because as a printing press was created, or multiple printing presses were created and spread out to all the different villages, now I can take the one copy and I'm like, here, printing press, make it 10,000 copies of these things, and then information can spread more efficiently, more rapidly. So the benefit of decentralization in the printing press is like, wow, we're decentralizing information in a really marvelous way.
Brilliantly said. So much better. Okay. And then the internet is kind of the next wave.
Yep.
And that decentralized content and communication.
Mm-hmm.
So do what you just did with the printing press for that.
Same thing, right? Right. And arguably information too, right? Like, but yes. Okay. So communication, like, let's really stick with that one, because email, I feel like there's that fantastic, I think it's
oh yeah, it's like the morning show, or
Sunday morning,
CBS.
A morning show. Yeah. Where they're like, what is email?
Yeah. What's that at?
Yeah. What's the at symbol?
Yeah.
But speaking about that, where communication before that point in time, you were limited to paper mail or telephone. Basically, like, meaning like those two technological pieces. But through the advent of the internet, the ability to communicate truly globally through email and other means was like, you almost, the world wasn't prepared for how much it would be able to communicate through the advent of the internet. Insert social media, texting, like so many other pieces as well, which is like, again, it's mind-blowing, because every time decentralization is applied, there are new innovations and new new efficiencies and new productivity gains that people hadn't anticipated that came as one of the advents of decentralization in that.
Yes. And, it starts as anything new. There's some bumps in the road, but you see the pros, you see the cons. As the cons kind of outweigh the pros, then change happens and hopefully you're moving in the right direction. The last one that he lists is 3-branch democracy, which is decentralized government.
That's decentralized power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have, we've got 3 branches that hopefully checks and balances, if that rings a bell. And the part that then led me to I understood the lineage of those things. Money. We haven't had a successful form of decentralized money.
No.
And it seems only natural that when you see the pros of those, information, communication, and power being decentralized, a lot of good has come from that.
Sure.
It's surprising to think that no one has really mastered the decentralized money yet. But that reduced the fear for me because I saw in the past how much success has come from this decentralization of a really important global
tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that makes
quick
sense.
aside, but that really rang true to me on coming from a place of intrigue and curiosity and not of fear.
I love that. All right. We've done a little bit of Bitcoin. What is it? Peer-to-peer electronic cash. We've talked about the fact that we're getting rid of this third party. We talked about the fact that Bitcoin is really just a ledger. It's beautiful because it is decentralized. It runs on thousands of different computers, and there is intrinsic value in doing so. Head nod to decentralization being a value add, or at least historically a value add to different technologies of the past.
Yep.
Where do we go now?
Now we go into, I have Bitcoin.
Yes.
You want my Bitcoin?
I want your Bitcoin.
How do I take my Bitcoin and give it to you? So transactions.
How to send a Bitcoin
I know how to
transaction.
give somebody a $5 bill, but how would I give you Bitcoin?
I want to insert one dependency here that we will come back to later, which is instead of instead of using the phrase accounts, sending money from one account to another.
Okay.
In the Bitcoin ecosystem, the word is wallet. So it's sending Bitcoin from one wallet to another. We will come back to how wallets are created, how they're maintained, and how this kind of works.
Cool.
But just know that when one individual sends a Bitcoin transaction, they're sending from a wallet to another wallet. But similar to ledgers just being like a notebook, really sending a transaction is as easy as you might imagine in your head, right? The first thing that is written down in the ledger between two wallets is, number one, the amount you're sending. How much Bitcoin is going from one wallet to another? That's part one. Part two is what's the address of the person receiving it, right? Similar to a bank account number, there is a wallet address for Bitcoin. So if I was going to send, 1 Bitcoin from Taylor's wallet to Haley's wallet, you would have a public available address that's like everyone knows, just like your bank account, right? Is like, right? And I can, say that's the address I want to send to. And then the third would be a quote unquote digital signature from my Bitcoin wallet. It's basically like hey, yes, I'm actually sending this to Haley. And that uses something called a private key. We'll get into what that is, but it's sort of like a password in a way that says like, yep, I'm sending it, and that's accurate. And so that makes up the transaction in a way.
That's not that's barely different.
Yeah, I don't know. You picture a notebook or picture Microsoft Excel if you're familiar with that. It's just, again, how much, where's it going, and then from me signing with my private key saying, yes, I'm actually sending in that way. The transaction goes into that direction. I'm going to help us with the transition to sort of the next topic in this, which would be, okay, so that sounds easy in concept, a Bitcoin transaction, but how is it wrapped into this larger thing called blockchain and how this thing all works together? Like,
ding, ding, ding,
you guys have talked about it, right?
Yeah,
you guys have talked about it being like super secure and all this stuff. So what kind of occurs?
Yeah.
So we're going to pause for a moment on this notion of a transaction. It's just information is all it is, right? Again, those 3 pieces of information. So this kind of next chapter, if you will, is um, how does that process of putting transactions together and putting them in the ledger actually work?
Okay.
Okay. So in doing so,
Yep.
transactions are organized into things called blocks.
Okay.
Wink, wink. This is going to get into a thing called a blockchain.
Yep.
And one of the pieces you have to understand in how they are organized into blocks is an individual or a process called mining. People have heard mining before, and they're like, Bitcoin mining, right? It's piracy, it's fraud, it's all these things. It is very analogous to mining gold. An individual with a pickaxe who's going to town on, a mountain, trying to extract gold in some way.
Okay.
And the reason it's analogous is because this individual is performing work. They're putting energy into this process, trying to extract gold. Now, every strike of the pickaxe doesn't necessarily net out gold.
No, but
right?
It costs energy.
It does cost energy to do so, right? Meaning that, man,
You
it's
pay
tired
the
every
price.
time I'm swinging that axe, right? It's kind of doing that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you work hard enough over a period of time, probability would state you're probably going to unpack some gold. And that is what ultimately is motivating you to keep going after more gold, right? Woohoo! Got some gold out of that thing, right? So Bitcoin mining is very similar to that process.
Okay.
Where you have an individual that has a computer. And that computer's job is to more or less do a math problem. Okay. So how does that math problem work? And again, caveat for the Bitcoiners out there, I know I am overgeneralizing this, so please do not judge me for it. I'm trying to just make this as basic as I can. A miner is going to, first thing, look out into the Bitcoin world, going to look at all the nodes, right? With all of those transactions, right? All of these quantities of Bitcoin, going to look at what's the wallet address that it's going to, and then look at the private key sign off.
Which are recorded in...
Well, they're broadcast first to the network. Okay, how it all becomes in a block. Okay. So the miner sitting there, and if you guys see me on camera, it's like, ooh, like looking out into the world, into the universe, and starts grabbing individual transactions, right? Those pieces of information, and tries to put them together into a block. Okay, so these are arbitrary pieces, but I'm going to say, let's say the miner grabs 100 transactions. Okay, put it together in this nice little file, and we're going to call this now a block, or at least maybe a block. Okay, it's a block of information. And then this miner's job is to perform work to see if they can get this block added to the ledger.
This is the best you've ever described it.
Really? Oh, that's good.
We've had this conversation a lot. And I'm like, I'm following.
Okay.
Yes.
So, but remember, right? If I'm the gold miner and I'm swinging the pickaxe, not every time works out, right? But I got to perform some work. So I grab the transactions and I put them together in a block. There's another thing we'll talk about in a future episode that they kind of add to the block. It's some information that they add. But now I got to do something with this. So in the digital world, in the digital landscape of Bitcoin, how do I perform work? Right? It's like, what does that mean? Like I code super hard?
Pressing buttons? No.
Okay. In this case, Bitcoin uses cryptography to force, to not only secure the blockchain, but to force the miner to do work.
Okay.
And the way they do this is they first mandate a certain algorithm, a cryptographic algorithm for the Bitcoin protocol to use. And that is called SHA-256. We're getting into some depth here, but stay with me, folks. We're going to get there. Okay?
Okay.
So think of SHA-256 as the pickaxe.
Okay.
Okay. So I have this information, right? And I have to do something with that information. Or actually, I'm going to walk back my pickaxe example. Think of SHA-256 like a box on a desk. It's just a machine, okay?
Okay.
And I take the information from the transactions and I plug it into SHA-256. And SHA-256 does some stuff to that information. We'll get maybe in this episode to what that is, but it spits something out on the other side.
So I take this information,
Block of transactions.
I put it in the box.
Yep.
The box functions
Yep.
and spits something out
Yes.
on the other side.
That thing on the other side is called a hash.
A hash.
Okay, it's a long stream of numbers and some letters. Really,
Okay.
really long though.
Okay.
Okay, and so now I've performed some work, and the reason I've performed work is for your computer to hash, to perform that little, put it into the box. It's very energy intensive. So the energy, literally, I mean, coming out of your wall,
Yes.
that your computer is plugged into to do this requires energy. You're paying that electric bill, right? So calling back to some of our second episode of What is Good Money, Bitcoin itself is backed by energy, by real energy. It's coming out of the wall, so you have to freaking pay for it, right? Similar to how mining gold is backed by the energy of you swinging that pickaxe, right? There's real value in trying to extract it.
Yeah.
So that I'm now, my computer, I paid for all this energy for my computer to do this work. And now I'm sitting here with a hash. What do I do with that hash? Well, that hash is the answer to a math problem in a way.
Okay.
And what I then do is I broadcast that answer to see if it is an appropriate solution to this math problem.
Yep.
And I'm way overgeneralizing here.
No,
in a
you're
way.
doing great.
Okay. Now, a lot of times I didn't get the answer right. That's the equivalent of a miner swinging the axe and not finding gold.
Empty dirt.
Okay. They go, darn, I didn't get the answer right. And the way that they're broadcasting this and checking the math is those nodes, the Bitcoin protocol, the people running the ledger, they are checking the math of the miners. Okay. So darn, snap my fingers. I didn't get that right. And there's an incentive for me to not only put in this energy and to try to mine, is because if I get the answer right, it does two things. It means that my block of transactions gets added to the Bitcoin ledger.
Yep.
Right? Woohoo! Okay, so that's a win, which is what all you and I as consumers want. That's how, right? It's how our transactions are recorded. So there's value that's created. It's providing utility. But in also doing so, the Bitcoin protocol rewards the miner with Bitcoin, with the monetary asset.
The gold.
Okay?
Yes.
So woohoo! Now, but again, we're going to say by majority, most of the time, when the miner does the work, tries to take the transactions and puts them into the box, SHA-256 box on the other side, the answer by majority is wrong. So what does the miner have to do? They got to keep working, right? So again, there's a little bit of information called a nonce. We'll get to that later. That they then have to change. They can take the same transactions. They could even say, you know what, I got to get to a different answer on the other side. I'm going to remove one transaction and grab another one that's been broadcasted and put it into the box, right? And they try it again. But again, woohoo, maybe they hash, right, this information. It wins. And so a particular node on the network goes, Miner Bob wins, right? That the hash that he has provided fits the answer that we've been looking for.
Yep.
And so Miner Bob gets excited because he's going to get a certain amount of Bitcoin. Right now, the block reward is, I think it's 6.25
Yeah, I think
Bitcoin.
6.25 or 6.125, yeah.
And then, again, if one node basically says like, yep, Miner Bob got the answer, that answer is broadcasted out to other nodes, and they can check the math.
They check the work.
They check the
I
work.
love that part.
Right? They check the work to make sure that Miner Bob's not a fraudster.
It's not
that things
just
are
one
doing
person's work.
Right?
Everybody's checking the work.
And as soon as 51% of the nodes, the majority of the nodes, are all singing to the same sheet of music and agreeing that Miner Bob got the right answer, that block, and thus the record of transactions on the ledger, is recorded, and then the entire thing starts again. And this happens about every 10 minutes.
I was going to say 10 minutes.
So that, I'm going to pull up again.
That was music.
Oh, thanks.
You
Pull up the
know-
nose of the plane.
I love you.
You.
That was so good because the whole time I was
makes
just
me
sitting
happy.
there,
I'm so
like,
glad we got it
with
right.
a big smile on my face. One, because like that was music. Two, I love it because a little romance note. We were drinking old fashions, and there was fire going, and we were on a nice date, and you explained it to me, and it was kind of like, okay, I'm starting to get it. And so I was in the love bubble.
Call
Smiling.
back to the love bubble.
Yeah. But that was fantastic. That was one of your best, like I said, analogy and metaphor is your strength. And I loved that. That was great.
I need to quickly review my notes to see if I missed anything else in that we need to get into.
What I like too is that in that story that you just used, in each of those moments, there's depth in so many of those elements. But what I think you strung together so well is that you were able to triage out the complicated parts that you could get sidetracked on. And so I think you picked, like I always say, good design is when you can't remove anything else. I think you that was beautifully designed because there was nothing in excess in there.
Thank you. Couple things that I did miss that I want to grab before we get into maybe even some of the other denser pieces. So, Minor Bob, woohoo! He got his block.
Minor Bob.
He got his block added to the ledger, right? So, it's important to note that when Minor Bob was putting together his set of transactions, 100 transactions that he was trying to add to the ledger, I referenced some information that Bob also had to bring in.
Okay.
One of those pieces of information is called a nonce. Basically, it's what allows Bob to change the input to the SHA 256 box, right? If he puts something in and it's like, darn it, the hash on the other side doesn't win him the award.
Yeah.
He's got to be able to change something. Yeah, he could change what transactions to try again. Okay, so the nonce is one of those pieces. But there's another critical thing that Bob has to add in with his block of transactions.
I'm trying to guess, but
it's the hash of the previous block.
Important.
Now,
the previous block that was accepted into the blockchain.
Correct.
By someone else.
Well, what you even just said, into the blockchain. Why is it called a blockchain? Oh. Why isn't this whole technology just called block technology? Why is it called blockchain technology?
Yeah.
So when we talk about this thing called hashing, SHA 256.
Yeah.
I gotta find. Hold on. Where is it? Enterprise key. Okay. How do I even describe this? This is why I'm so glad we're doing this episode because these are tough topics to kind of try to unpack simply.
I mean, the outline you were playing with before. I'm curious what you're going into.
So, SHA 256 heavily relies on the input that goes into the box and then spits out a hash on the other side.
Okay.
So I'm going to make this really simple. Let's say I just took a number, 12, and I put it into SHA 256. On the other side, it would give me this super long set. I think I got to come up with the number. I think it's like 62 or 64 total characters. It's not alphanumeric. There are some letters that it uses, but it uses numbers 0 through 9 to create this super long string. Okay. Now the beauty is every time I put in the number 12, the resulting hash on the other side is the exact same.
Yes.
Okay. So as long as the input is the same, the hash is the same on the other side. But let's say I changed it from 12 to 13 and I put it into SHA 256. The hash on the other side is completely different.
Got it.
So the sheer number of permutations of even that tiny shift, right?
I kind of want you to look up the actual statistics because this is really fun. But while you're doing that, if you can multitask. So when you say, if I put 12 into the SHA 256 box and the hash that pops out on the other side, every time I put in 12, I'm going to always get that hash. Is that how others can check the work?
Yes.
Okay.
They take the input, they plug it into SHA 256, and they can check it.
Got it.
Okay. So, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I love this because this is the, where you're like, everyone's seen them. This is the size of the sun. And they're like, this is the size of the star. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And your brain starts to explode because you can't imagine something that big. This is like that. So prepare your brains.
Okay.
Go.
So, first thing, we're going to nerd out here for a second.
Do it.
When computers are creating information, exchanging information.
Yep.
They operate in things called bits.
Yes.
And I want you to imagine just like a slot, almost like in your cupboard.
Yep.
There's a slot in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a computer, there are many slots, but each slot can have two possible values.
Okay.
A slot can either have a value of 0
Mm-hmm.
or a slot can have a value of 1. Two possible values. That's it. Okay?
Okay.
Each bit can only have two possible values.
Okay.
So what SHA-256 ultimately is it's creating 256 slots.
Got it.
And each of them can have two values, right? Either a 0 or a 1.
Okay.
So if you are a fan of math and
Mhm.
exponential math,
Mm-hmm.
this math, the number of probabilities is 2 to the
Mhm.
power of 256.
Got it.
Let's say that for those, though, maybe you're not super strong in math, and
Yeah.
that's okay. How big is that number?
Yeah.
2 to the 256.
Lay it on me.
And this is what there's another way of saying this is when you take an input and
Yep.
you put it into SHA-256, how many possible outcomes are there
Yep.
from this little SHA-256 device? Putting this into perspective, the number 2 to the 256 power is far greater than the number of atoms in the observable universe.
And let me punctuate. The known universe, not the Earth, the known universe.
I'm going to say that again. 2 to the power of 256,
Yeah.
which is basically what the number of possibilities of what SHA-256 could ultimately hash on the other side. The number is far greater than the number of atoms in the observable universe. Okay? So
Hey, we're weaving space in again.
that yeah, you're right. That is the theme. So that means that there are that many different hashes out there, different probabilities of hash. It means if I change the input even a little bit, I'm getting a different hash on the other side.
Yeah.
So coming back to where blockchain comes in,
Yeah.
when miner Bob
Minor
is
Bob.
mining something,
Mm-hmm.
he's putting together a block of transactions.
Yep.
He's putting together a nonce that he can change freely.
And a nonce is just a number.
It's just a number
that
right?
he
Yeah.
adds
Sticks
on
on
to the
like
train.
a Lego brick. Okay.
Yep.
And it has to include the hash from the previous block.
Okay.
Okay, so what this does is what it's doing is it's creating a history of every block that's ever been added to the Bitcoin ledger.
Repeat
Because-
that.
So
Okay, so he has these three elements.
let's say take 3 Legos. Is
Three
what it
Legos.
is. 3
Red,
Legos.
blue, and yellow.
Okay. The first Lego is
Okay.
the new transactions that he's trying to add to the ledger.
Red block, new transactions.
The next one is a nonce that he can freely change.
Blue block is a nonce. It's just
And
a
that's
number.
it, right? Because all we're trying to do is change the inputs of what goes into SHA-256. And the last one is the hash, which again, remember, is the result after the SHA-256 machine
Yep.
of the previous block.
Got it.
Okay, and remember, everyone knows what that is because they broadcasted it out to the network. They said,
Yeah.
"Hey, here was the answer that the last miner came up with."
Okay.
Right. So the reason this is important
Yeah, why?
is because if in this case, right, if miner Bob is taking these 3 Legos
Yep.
and putting them into the SHA-256 box to
Yep.
come up with an outcome, right,
Yep.
and it's correct, this is what's creating the immutability of the previous blocks beforehand. This is why you
Oh.
cannot change a transaction from the past.
Because that information is locked
Is locked in the hash.
And
So
that's not changing.
it's never changed. So let's say I tried.
And it's logged in all of the
all of the other
nodes
ones too.
in all the
thus
ledgers.
creating a blockchain.
Oh my gosh.
Chain. So this is why. So imagine you again. You had a
That's
fraudster.
the link.
You had a fraudster that said, "You know what? I'm gonna go backwards." And I don't know, a couple of months back, I'm gonna change the ledger to say I had 10 Bitcoin instead of 5 or instead of 1. Right?
Right.
Even if you tried to do this, right? If you tried to change that one little bit of information, not only, by the way, do you need to control 51% of the network, for 51% majority agrees
Oh my
with
God,
you
my
that this
brain's
is correct,
spinning. Yeah, I'm
but
getting
it changes the hash. And remember, that hash is on so it's been included on every single block moving forward. So thus the immutability. So this is where you're getting into
Okay.
the longer that Bitcoin is used,
Yep.
right? The more blocks that are added to the ledger, the more and more secure Bitcoin becomes. The older it
Ah.
gets, the better it gets because it becomes more and more immutable.
I told everybody to brace themselves.
So that was a lot. And I even looking at your eyes right now, I think those listening would probably be like, I kind of get it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's all you need to know.
You're 51% on board.
Yes, you are 51. You, the listeners, thanks for being 51% on board. But all this to say, even if you don't have this picture perfect in your head,
Yeah.
if you do in any way trust Taylor and Haley in this,
Yeah.
it is knowing that the whole reason this thing is called blockchain is because there is a chain of information that is linking these things together.
I love that.
And
I don't think I've heard that part.
Every single time there's mining moving forward, right? There's a little history that's from the previous blockchain. And this is not because I want to or because it's nice to keep history. It's because it literally adds to and increases the security itself of the Bitcoin ledger. Okay.
Wow.
Last other bits as
Yeah.
we're kind of getting into this is, and this is an important topic for, I'm hoping you listeners out there, maybe you're with friends or in a car listening to this, or afterwards you're going to go discuss this stuff, right? You have a couple of like juicy new topics to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
A really important piece of this whole thing is Miner Bob putting in the work to put this together.
Yeah.
And specifically the verification of Miner Bob's work. And that topic or system is called proof of work. Makes sense. It all goes all the way back to grade school when you had to show your work on how you did, addition, subtraction, multiplication, things like that.
Yeah. Great example.
That's really that is one of the most important aspects and what makes Bitcoin itself such an incredible monetary unit is because the ecosystem uses this thing called proof of work. Miner Bob has to use energy to try and get the hash correct. We know now with blockchain that all the previous hash from the block before has to be included, which is making it harder and harder to alter the ledger in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
It's broadcasted out to the network, which means that as long as we have consensus that we have the right hash, that we can add this in, but it's the proof of that work that adds to this whole thing. Proof of work, proof of work, proof of work. Say that 1,000 times because it will probably be studied in real depth as one of the most important pieces of blockchain or Bitcoin specifically as a technology or as a monetary technology.
Proof of work.
Okay, now where do we go, Maestro?
And just to make sure I'm following, those things you just outlined, those components, that's what makes up proof of work.
Proof of here. I'll say this little explainer that
Just making sure I understand.
To me, what I would say the most important aspect is the verification of everything that Bob did is called proof of work.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So when Bob says, "I think I have the right answer," he broadcasts that, and then like one says, "This is the right answer."
Yes.
The rest of the
can check
nodes
that answer.
get to check
Yes.
when 51% agree that Bob got the right answer.
Yep.
The block of transactions gets put into the chain.
Yep.
And Bob gets his reward.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Where do you want to go next?
Let's see. We talked about all sorts of things. We got to the point where Bob gets rewarded.
Okay,
Bob
let's talk
gets
about
rewarded. I think that's important to touch on.
Yeah.
Bob gets rewarded. Currently, the reward is 6.25 for Bob getting the right answer. And he gets 6.25 Bitcoin.
Yes.
If he wins.
Yes.
Bob wins.
Yep.
He gets his portion of the digital gold.
Yep. I actually think this is getting into the question of how is Bitcoin created and issued? Because that's the interesting part, right, about mining and this block reward.
Okay, yeah.
So
yes.
let's play off your exact bit right there.
See, this is why we make a good team. He reads my mind. He takes the information that's coming out of my mouth. He puts it into the box on his desk in his brain. He goes, "Oh my gosh, is this the answer?" And guess what? He usually gets it right. Bob wins.
There's a lot of things.
Bob wins all the time.
Okay, there's a lot of things to get right here.
2 hearts.
1 Bitcoin
Equal 1 Bitcoin. Oh my God.
So I want us all, wherever you're listening, right, take a breath because we're an hour in. We've talked about a lot of things. We've
Oh
talked
my
about,
gosh, we're an hour in?
I know.
I would have thought we were 15 minutes.
I know. We've talked about
Cool.
digital gold and peer-to-peer cash.
Yep.
We've talked about getting rid of this third party, which the way you do that is you're able to run decentralized nodes,
Yep.
and that's a win for a number of reasons. We talked about Bitcoin really just being a ledger of transactions. We've talked about how those transactions are organized into blocks and
Yep.
secured by something called SHA-256.
Mhm.
And then we've alluded to, but getting to Miner Bob, the whole reason, or one of the whole reasons Miner Bob is incentivized to do any of this work. Why is Miner Bob paying his electricity bill? Why is he having a
Why
computer
is he investing
dedicated
in
to
the
do
work?
any of this stuff, right? Similar to a miner mining gold, the whole idea is to get to this thing that everybody says is valuable and agrees is a monetary unit. In a gold miner's case, it's extracting gold.
Yep.
In Bob's case, it's extracting Bitcoin.
Okay.
Now we're gonna get to, this is called the mining reward, okay, or the block reward. And I want to pause for just 1 second to be like, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah.
There is actually a second thing that is incentivizing Bob to mine,
Oh, yes, I know what you're
and those
saying.
are fees,
Those
mining
fees.
fees.
Yes.
So if any of you ever do or have gone on to an exchange to purchase Bitcoin or even to move Bitcoin,
Yep.
you'll see a little caveat that says there's a fee associated with moving this, right? So when Bob is doing that, like picking transactions from the universe to put into his block,
Yeah.
he's also looking at the fee that the user has agreed to pay to move that Bitcoin.
Okay.
So it's nice because, right, in some ways, Bob is going to be like, ooh, maybe the first thing he does is he's going to say, I'm going to pick all of the people that agreed to pay high fees,
Uh-huh.
and I'll take all their transactions, right, and put them in first.
Okay.
So this is where future episode, we're going to get into, your face right now is the
I'm
best.
crinkling my brow.
We're going to get into, this is part of the supply and demand of how we're going to keep miners interested for a longer period of time once the
Okay.
block reward is gone.
Oh, okay.
Because
we need miners to transact the
for a long time, right?
Bitcoin.
For as long as Bitcoin will ever be around,
right.
right?
So if all Bitcoin is issued,
Because there's a $21 million cap, fees become
you
important.
can't let it die on the vine.
Correct. So
I got
fees, and in fact, we'll do maybe even a different episode where we dig into the fee aspect, but I did want to address that in addition to Miner Bob extracting Bitcoin if he wins, there are also the fees that Bob gets, which is kind of nice. But let's come back to the block reward.
Okay.
So Miner Bob wins. Woohoo. I secured the correct hash.
Yep.
The network agrees.
Yep.
And I'm now, quote unquote, paid a block reward. The Bitcoin protocol issues a certain amount of Bitcoin to Bob.
Following.
And right now, February, I'm pretty darn sure the block reward is 6.25 Bitcoin per block.
Okay.
So every 10 minutes,
Yep.
when a miner wins,
Yep.
6.25 Bitcoin are issued into the world.
Yep.
This is how, similar to mining gold, how gold literally makes its way into the world to be smelted into coins and bars and necklaces and all these different things.
Yeah.
This is how Bitcoin makes its way into the world.
Love it.
So it's amazing because the miner themselves, where maybe in a gold context where they're really just trying to get gold because they know gold is valuable as a monetary unit.
Yeah.
Mining in a Bitcoin sense is they are grabbing transactions and putting them into the ledger. In addition to being able to extract Bitcoin, which is
Yeah.
great because that means Bitcoin's being issued into the world and
Yeah.
it's this valuable asset, or it's growing in its value.
Okay.
It means that the miner is providing utility.
Yeah, they're a service.
They are literally a service. They're adding transactions, and in doing so, again and again and again, securing the Bitcoin network. And that is just mind-numbingly cool. I am nerding out very
you are
hard
nerding
right
out
now.
so hard.
But it's such an important piece because it's what keeps miners really interested, at least between now and year, I think 2140, when the last Bitcoin will be issued or mined.
Yeah.
It keeps them really in the boat right now. Now, also important to note that about every 4 years, there's what's called a halving,
Yes.
meaning that block reward will go from 6.25 to 3.18 of
Yeah.
that's how many. And the the theory, if you will, behind this is that because Bitcoin has gone up in value over time, it's very possible that the overarching value of monetarily speaking of Bitcoin at that time, 3.125 is maybe even more than what 6.25 is right now.
And if you kind of trace the history back since 2008 is when we said
2009 technically is when it was launched.
So when it started in 2009, it was X number.
I think it was 50 was the starting point. Yeah, that's how much kind of went out into the world. But all this to say that yes, eventually Bitcoin does have a hard cap of 21 million Bitcoin. And again, roughly the year, I think it's 2140 or 2150. All the Bitcoin will be mined. But right now, it's the block reward or the mining reward that is keeping people in, adding transactions to the ledger and moving this forward.
I salute the miners.
Me too.
I think that's
None
really
of it works
cool.
without them.
I think it's kind of like you veterans and you salute the I appreciate the work that they put in.
I think that's actually a very good, relevant comment because truly,
Yes,
without miners, Bitcoin doesn't operate. The system doesn't work. That's what
it feels positive.
It does. Well, I agree.
Community.
And I think I agree because it's this larger decentralized network of humans
working
who
together.
are working together towards, hey, money's pretty important. We should have the most secure money on planet Earth. Well, if I'm interested in participating in that ecosystem, I should be rewarded for my work in doing so. Insert block reward and fees. It makes so much sense.
I was going to say it's kind of the romantic side of it. I'm a sucker for romantic thought, not like love romantic, but I like thinking about the wishful side of it of like you have this group that's working together. And we said, right, it is a trustless system, but you have this large group coming together trusting math. Right. But there is trust in it.
There's trust in math. I like that. I actually really like that point.
That's a nice thought.
A couple other pieces, and then we can get into maybe number 7 on this list coming in down. Again, I was
going to say we got to touch back on the wallet.
We will.
We've talked about transacting, and so we'll
get to the one bit I do want to come back to is again we talked about again the little some of these phrases that are now putting like why this thing is called Bitcoin and like all these things putting together. So we talked about a bit as a little slot could be a ones and zeros. We talked about a block chain, like a block being a block of transactions chained together through how mining kind of works from left to right. And we also alluded to this thing called SHA-256. It's this fancy machine, and specifically, it's a cryptographic function. This is where, if you want to sound super smart to your coffee patrons or your dinner guests, this is where cryptography comes into this entire process.
You mean, is that related to cryptocurrency?
So that's where, for me personally, I'm not saying you might not even be on this particular train, but this is where I'm at. I think cryptocurrency is sort of one of those phrases of an era that in the early days of Bitcoin and other quote unquote cryptocurrencies, it made sense. And it was like, yes, that's how maybe the world is most comfortable referring to things like Bitcoin or other alternative cryptocurrencies.
It oddly relates to like calling it the Wild West.
Yes.
Actually relates to the gold metaphor.
Yeah. In that way.
Anyway.
I think, and that's where, again, I wanted to bring that up in terms of,
I like that.
It's the cryptography of SHA-256 that really is why it was in the beginning called cryptocurrency. So if anyone is like looking at you and they're referring to it as cryptocurrency, that's really the source of that.
Yeah.
That said, for just me, this is my boat. I think now to where we are at with Bitcoin specifically is the world is no longer created equal. This is the one.
Yeah.
Yes, as I sit here in this chair, if you went to a cryptocurrency exchange like Coinbase, you went to coinbase.com, and you attempted to buy other cryptocurrencies, sometimes referred to as altcoins, there are some major, and I'm doing air quotes right now, other cryptocurrencies. And the reason I would call them major is they do have sizable market caps, Ethereum being another one. But you will probably, unless you, the users, or you, the listeners, ask us to, we will almost never discuss anything else because Bitcoin has won. Yeah. It has won the race of which which of these various cryptocurrencies is going to be the most widely used, the most secure, have the best shot at being the best monetary system, the best money moving forward, it's one. Now, that's not to say that people don't still get experimental and they go to sites like Coinbase or others and they quote unquote day trade altcoins. And they do so because they're just trying to make money, right? They're like, well, I really hope that market hype increases XYZ Harrison Ford coin like up and to the right. And then when they click sell, they're hoping to make money. Meme coins, thank you.
Buzzword.
But by and large, at least my opinion, this one has won.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is the supreme one. And so there are maybe some of you out there listening who have been intrigued by other cryptocurrencies, other alternative altcoins, other meme coins.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say that, yeah, you can sit there and day trade and move money around and, the market is a zero-sum game. Like, right, there are winners and there are losers, and you can extract dollars in that way. But in my humble opinion, this is the one that won.
I'm in the same camp. The coins are not all created equal.
They're not.
And I think that it really is kind of, as a person sitting here, if you are new to this and you're intrigued, just be careful. Just like our disclaimer that, we have, do your homework.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, caution.
Okay.
But that's a side note. Yeah.
You mentioned wallets now.
Yeah. Okay. So we've gone over the transaction.
Yep.
And I have said number of Bitcoin that I want to send from this address to a new address.
Yes.
That's recorded in the ledger. The ledger is, let's say Bob has won, my transaction's in the block that's being added to the chain. We've gone over that. Now, is this considered storage?
Yeah, that'd be fair. Okay, so hold on. I need to find something. La 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 la. Here we go.
In reflection too on all these new vocab words, what I like about Bitcoin and that Bitcoin mindset of things making sense, they're rooted in logic. A lot of the terms have been chosen with logic. If you're confused, look at the word.
Right.
A wallet, a miner's great with our gold analogy, blockchain, Bitcoin. At first it sounds like science fiction, and then when you actually look at the words, they're chosen with actually mindfulness.
They are. Okay.
If you get lost.
What's a wallet?
What's
so to
a
your
wallet?
point, you're going to send some Bitcoin from your wallet or account, semantics, whatever you're most comfortable with, to my wallet or account, right? So a couple of things have to be present for that to occur. So there's two terms that we're going to go through, a public key and a private key.
Okay.
Those are two things that we're going to unpack here. I asked ChatGPT earlier to give me a very simple story or analogy to explain Bitcoin public and private keys, or this is essentially how wallets work. So this is the story that ChatGPT came up with. The secret safe and the glass mailbox, okay? So imagine you have a special kind of mailbox, one that has a glass front so anyone can see what's inside, but only you have the key to open it. The mailbox address is like your public key. Anyone can see it and send you letters, or in this case, send you Bitcoin. The key to open it is your private key. Only you have it, and it lets you access and move what's inside. If someone knows your mailbox address, or in this case, your wallet address, they can send you letters or Bitcoin, but they can't open it because they don't have your private key. So I think,
I love
pause right there. That's essentially how a Bitcoin wallet operates.
Yep.
I really like the mailbox with a glass front because right now, again, the 99% of us will never do this, but because Bitcoin is a ledger and because part of that, or part of what I just discussed, is public keys, right? Almost like public accounts. You can right now go onto the interwebs and start looking at various public keys, Bitcoin wallet addresses, and you can see how much Bitcoin is in there.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. While it's not, I don't believe these are not confirmed by these large entities. A company like Coinbase that is a place to purchase and transact in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It would make logical sense that they probably have a lot of Bitcoin on the books. So you can go scour the various public addresses for Bitcoin, and in the areas where there's a large amount of Bitcoin, those are either the billionaires that have secured a lot over a period of time, or those are the crypto exchanges where Bitcoin is bought and sold.
Got it.
So that would be an example of like, okay, I can look through the glass window of the mailbox to see how much Bitcoin is in there.
Okay.
It is, I suppose, also worth noting that depending on how you set up various wallets in this case, or public and private keys, that a big part of the Bitcoin world is privacy. So trying to keep your name off of things.
At first, when you hear that, I feel like that's one of those things that sounds like a red flag. Can you explain maybe why it's not actually a red flag?
In most cases, your publicly identifiable information is not associated with your public key. So meaning, if Harrison Ford, because I'm staring at the mug right now, had a Bitcoin address, a public Bitcoin address, unless he chose to make that known, as I was scanning the various Bitcoin, the public addresses on the internet, looking at things, I wouldn't know which is Harrison's.
Right, unless he advertised
unless he literally said, this is it.
Who would
and
do
again,
that?
Even if he did, right, what that does is it allows me or any end user of Bitcoin to send Bitcoin to that address. So that would be one thing that could occur. Like, hey, you want to send Harrison some Bitcoin? I think most people, though, the reason that they want to be really conscious to that is, let's say you were a high net worth individual and you had a lot of Bitcoin in one address. In some ways, it would kind of make you a target. Like, hey, I got a ton of money stashed in my account over here, right?
Yeah.
So that's not the case at all. But coming back to, that's really what a public key is. It's just a mailbox with a glass front that says anyone can send Bitcoin to this thing.
Okay.
But to pull Bitcoin out, or for you as a user, for you, Haley, to send me, Taylor, Bitcoin from your wallet to mine, the private key has to come into play.
Okay.
Right? So you have to, what's called, sign a transaction that says, yes, I agree to send Taylor a Bitcoin. Right? So I wanted to come back to, again, some of the probabilities, because that we were having fun with this.
Yeah.
Because, again, you need a public key to know where to send stuff.
Yep.
You need a private key to sign, like, the transaction to say, yes, I agree to do this. So we're going to do a little head nod to some of those that would be skeptical to Bitcoin out there, right?
Yes.
They're like, Bitcoin's going to get hacked.
I feel like
right?
this is, it's like,
your
well,
money's going to get lost.
Who has my personal information and who's going to leak it?
Or specifically, right, who has my private key? Because that's the main thing. If you have my private key, if you have the private key to the wallet, you can control all the Bitcoin in that wallet. So we're going to, though, pretend in this instance that all people, me and you included, are like pretty good with privacy. We're going to be very conscious, similar to like our banking passwords, that when we log into our bank online, right? I'm not like taking my username and password and giving that out to the world. I'm going to be pretty secure about it. So let's pretend that everyone is super secure. But still, there are Bitcoin skeptics out there that are going to go, you're going to get hacked, right? For sure. Let's logically unpack how this would happen. What this means is that a hacker would have to be able to guess the private keys for an individual wallet.
Yes.
Okay? That's how they have to do it. They have to basically go in and guess. So, again, coming back to one of the earlier pieces that we said, the number of possible private keys available is equivalent to the number of atoms in the observable universe.
Same thing as...
Yes.
Okay.
That's a lot. That's a lot of guesses.
I'm going to press pause.
Okay.
Because I liked how you used the mailbox metaphor, and it made sense, right? You have a glass mailbox, but a key. When you say that, I think of a physical key, right, in the mailbox metaphor. We said that a hash is a list of a long list of numbers and letters.
Yes.
So we know a hash looks like that. What is a key? A key is not a physical key. It can be a digital key, but what is a key?
Okay, hold on. I have something in my head, but I'm chatting into ChatGPT right now to see if it can do it better.
I mean, I think I know what a key is.
You do.
Okay.
But I want to blend what it gives me and what I have in my noggin. The cryptography behind Bitcoin and SHA-256.
Yep.
So SHA-256 is used for both Bitcoin mining and private keys.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we know that for mining, as we've already kind of covered, miners are looking for a valid hash, essentially. That's what they're looking for on the mining side. We've already covered that. But for private keys, again, a Bitcoin private key is a random 256-bit number.
Okay.
Really long number. And to generate a Bitcoin private key, a random number is chosen as that private key. So like boop, boop, random number is chosen. That number is then put into the SHA-256 machine, right? Which then spits something out on the other side.
Okay.
And that's a public key. Technically, once again, that public key goes into the machine once more to create the final Bitcoin address. I know your eyes are kind of crazy right now, and which
in my
which
brain,
is fair.
I have the conjunction junction train.
Yeah, that's fair. But all that matters
Yep.
is that similar cryptography is used to create the public key.
Okay.
Which again is the address that anyone could put Bitcoin into and see. But you are not able to reverse engineer the private key from the public key.
That's what I wanted to make sure was
That's
said.
the main thing. So that's where then kind of getting into similar statistics as before is like, what's the probability, right? So like we said, the number of possible private keys is similar to the number of possible hashes,
Right.
which is the number of atoms in the observable universe. But I wanted to take a little bit of a different angle. So we're all going to imagine there's this evil hacker out there again who is trying to get at our private keys so that they could control our Bitcoin. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say that hacker had a supercomputer, not a quantum computer, which some of you might already be coming in tune with the current political or current norms right now in quantum computing, just supercomputer, which is a really, really big computer capable of a lot of computational power.
Okay.
And let's say that supercomputer was able to guess 1 trillion private keys per second.
Oh, this is the one that I read. Yeah, that you
That's a
showed me
huge
before.
number, by the way. Think about that. A supercomputer capable of guessing 1 trillion private keys a second and trying to get in.
A second. A trillion a second.
A trillion a second.
It's huge.
This is where, like, when it's like, how many possible private keys are there? The number of atoms in the known universe. It's hard to wrap your arms around. So this is another vantage point to try and figure that out.
Trillion a second.
Okay. So that means if this supercomputer took 1 year, it would have guessed 31.5 quadrillion keys, which quadrillion is not a number that I typically use. Okay, so hold on.
In 1 year. Okay.
So, meaning we're going to keep going out.
Yeah.
Even if this supercomputer ran guessing private keys for the entire age of the universe,
Holy
it
shit.
still would have only checked a microscopic fraction of the number of possible private keys.
All right,
out
everybody.
there.
Let's zoom out.
So again, what that means is with a supercomputer, you would need more than the age of the universe and guessing 1 trillion private keys a second to crack a single private key. Deep breath. What that means is as long as
That means everyone just calm down.
as long as you
That
are
means calm
maintaining
down.
good discipline with your private keys, right? You're going to be okay.
You're going to be okay.
Okay.
Oh
now,
my goodness.
for those that are maybe more in tune with quantum computing, which has been a relatively hot topic of like recent months, especially with Google's Willow quantum computing chip and Microsoft's, whose name I can't even pronounce. They came out with it just a couple of days ago. Mariana 1?
Major Ram?
Mariana 1?
Marjoram?
Marjoram, the spice one.
Major
Anyways, we're not going to get into this because this is not the subject of this particular podcast, but in quantum computing, we talked about bits with Bitcoin. Quantum computing uses something called qubits, and existing in today's world, for example, like Google's Willow chip, we're getting into the 1,000 qubits. That's how many these chips have.
Okay.
You would need the qubits to be in the millions in order for a quantum computer to break SHA-256. Mind you, between now and then, whenever that reality may very well hit, the Bitcoin world is very aware of this. So you can imagine trying to update the Bitcoin protocol with new layers of cryptography to try and fight quantum computing. That's number one. The other part that's always really fascinating in this is when people go like, oh, well, quantum's going to break Bitcoin. If quantum is capable of breaking the Bitcoin SHA-256 algorithm,
We got bigger problems.
We got bigger
people.
problems like other
You
financial
totally
institutions.
stole my thunder. I was so
Sorry, go for it.
excited
No,
to
do
say
it.
that.
Do
No,
it.
you said it. You said it.
It's like
Like if it
healthcare
Y'all.
records, financial institutions, insurance, like basically most other areas of your life that you would attempt to keep private and secret would equally be vulnerable. So
or probably be vulnerable before.
possibly. So it's just
You
it's
get
not like a
there.
Bitcoin only problem. It's like just
Yeah.
privacy and security in general can
I love
go
that.
out the door.
Oh my god.
Okay. So the reason we bring all this up, and again we bring up that like hacker even instance or anecdote,
Yeah.
is because I think a lot of folks, reasonably so,
Yeah.
have heard about Bitcoin and they go, okay, like even if I'm on board, it sounds like a lot of responsibility to maintain, especially my private keys, because that is quote unquote the key to your Bitcoin and how it works, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of
And so
responsibility.
this is like a very, and I think we have a healthy respect for this. That's a very real reality.
It is.
If you lose your private keys, you lose control of that Bitcoin forever. As we already said, there's no ability to like hack in and recover it, right? So I'm gonna zoom out a little bit to talk about what that responsibility kind of looks like from
Yeah.
a wallet management perspective, but also
Awesome.
what the give get is here.
Yeah.
Right. So coming all the way back to the beginning of the episode, about an hour and maybe 40-ish minutes ago, we talked about removing that third party, removing the bank
Yeah.
in a way as a middleman.
Yeah.
And so in doing so, at least in today's terms, there is an agreement that you're making, which is if I'm going to remove a middleman,
Mm-hmm.
that means I'm taking responsibility for this thing moving forward.
Yeah.
So what might that look like? And again, there could be some changes to this in the very near future, but I just want to talk about what that looks like.
Yeah.
So in today's terms, if you and I wanted to store Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
there are a few very popular options that people use
Yeah.
for these wallets. One type of wallet would be called like a software wallet.
Mm.
And this would be the equivalent to like an app running on your computer, your Mac, or your PC, or whatever you have. And so that software wallet would essentially have access to a public key. So here's a destination for Bitcoin.
Yep.
And then it would also have a private key, again,
Yes.
capable of managing the Bitcoin in that private address. Software wallet. There are pros and cons to this. Some people, I think, gravitating towards software wallets if they do a lot of transacting daily, weekly, monthly in the space of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies.
That makes sense.
They need real-time access to be able to day trade or do other things like that if
Right.
that's how they do things. That is certainly not, I think, our position on wallets or even advocating for a type of wallet. But a software wallet is easily accessible. Anybody could download multiple types today if they wanted to.
Roger.
The second type, and perhaps the more secure in a way, would be called a hardware wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And a hardware wallet is a physical device similar to like a USB thumb drive. And the whole premise with this is that the drive itself is holding onto that private key, and it's gapping it from the internet. It's gapping it from anybody having access to it in any way, shape, or form. And this is where hardware wallets and software wallets, which future episode, again, we can start to compare.
Yeah.
But this is where the security is just like a whole hard difference, right? Where with a software wallet, because it's literally an application, it's very likely that in some way, shape, or form, that private key is somewhere on your computer, right? And so this is where when people mess up the security around their wallet infrastructure, this is where it starts to fail.
That makes sense. I think that's such a great distinction, because when you're thinking about the security of Bitcoin, don't mistake the security of Bitcoin technology
Yes.
with the security of Bitcoin on your phone.
On your phone or your
'Cause
computer.
Then
Yes.
you're the security in question is your device,
Correct.
not the coins.
That would then be compromising
I think
the
that's
private key.
I think that probably gets conflated quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, it has been hacked. Most likely it's because your device has been hacked.
correct.
Or the app in which, right.
Correct. So like a common one being, I know every person, if you have an email today, I guarantee you've been sent phishing emails. You can kind of see they're scams of some sort, and there's a variety of scams out there. Send me money, or give me your information. Right? It's not out of the sphere of possibilities to think that someone could send you a scam type email with the potential to download something onto your device and start storing keystrokes. Right? It's going to wait for access in a way to where it could potentially scrub your device, see if there is anything on there worth taking, in this case, maybe a private key, and now it would have total control over whatever's in that public key address or wallet address. So that's where hardware wallets, again, physical object that is keeping that private key from in any way, shape, or form making its way onto technology, onto a computer, things of that nature. Now, one of the other core concepts around wallets is like a thumbnail. Again, this thumb drive, right? Well, what would happen if this hardware wallet that had some amount of Bitcoin on it, right? Or specifically that has the private key on it, so it controls the movement of Bitcoin. What if it's at home and there's a fire?
Yeah.
Right? And oh my gosh, there's a fire or there's a flood and something physically happens to that hardware device. Well, certainly you don't want to be in a situation where it's like, oh my God, that thing is now physically broken. I've now lost my Bitcoin effectively.
Yeah.
So as a means of recovering your private key,
yep.
And I suppose I can't say this with 100% factual truth, but most wallets, or in this case, any hardware wallet worth their salt, your salt, will have a recovery phrase. Typically, it's a string of 12 to 24 randomized words. And again, it's referred to as a seed phrase.
Yep.
And so the premise of this is that, again, if your physical hardware wallet, and I'm holding up my thumb here in the camera, were to burn down, anything were to happen to it, as long as you have the seed phrase, you're okay. And in fact, the seed phrase, in a way, is what really gives you ultimate control over that Bitcoin wallet.
I have actually, in total honesty, I have confused keys and seed phrases until now.
Because remember, so the coming back to, hold on, we're going to come back to what this is, right?
Don't strike me down, Bitcoin.
To generate a Bitcoin address, a random number is chosen as the private key.
Yes.
Right? So it's a random number that ends up being the private key to sign these transactions. So again, it's on the device, it's on the little thumb drive thing, and if it burns down, like, how do I get that thing back?
Yeah.
So that's where the seed phrase comes in. So this is the this is like a total Bitcoin enthusiast phrase for the cypherpunks out there, the those that were sort of at the origin story of Bitcoin, like early 2000s, 2009, really into cryptography, and we're looking into ways to like build a technology like this. Yes. This is where what's so fascinating behind like something like a seed phrase, where this is what really allows you to take your money, your Bitcoin, with you anywhere in the world, anywhere in the globe, right? Because again, we're going to picture the walls lined with these mailboxes with glass doors on front, right? And so they exist in the ledger out there. They're not controlled by any one entity. They're decentralized over a number of nodes. So they're not like in one server, or they're not in one country or destination, right? So I can access and see all the clear mailboxes anywhere in the world, anywhere globally, right? And as long as I have my private key, I can get my Bitcoin out and do stuff with it.
Yeah.
But let's say, again, I'm going to make up these like crazy hysterical things. All of a sudden I don't know, I moved to a different country, and oh no, my hardware device, my private key is stuck in California, right, where we're at. As long as I have my seed phrase, my recovery phrase, boop, boop, I can re-access my private key and I can do stuff with my Bitcoin. So in a way, like those words become vitally, vitally important. And so in the world of Bitcoin management and the security behind it, and you being a good steward of your own Bitcoin, you end up taking very good care of the seed phrase or seed phrases, depending on spreading your Bitcoin over multiple wallets, because that way you always have a recovery means. And so this is where, right, you can start to see
you're not going to memorize your key.
No, too long. Way too
Yeah.
long. 256, right?
Yeah.
Way too long. So that's where you start to get into the principles behind Bitcoin security and how you can, as an individual, take control over these things with some reasonable doubt. Last bit around wallet security and around wallet management, because if I were a listener out there and I'm still new to Bitcoin, this would sound definitely intimidating.
It would.
And there is, I think, this like very sobering moment where you go, that is a lot of responsibility to take care of my money in this way.
Yeah.
And so this is where we were talking with someone recently about the notion of like, well, how great is it when you maybe have a fraudulent credit card transaction, you just call the credit card company and they're like, nope, that wasn't you, no problem, right?
Middleman can take care of the.
This is where I want to be objective in the spot of not everything about banks is terrible, right?
No.
These like larger topics, yes, like inflation and all these things, like yes, those things are really, really rough. But there is value to the services of certain centralized parties and what they do, right? Yeah. It's like same thing as like why, like if you were to outsource the cleaning of your home to a third party, because you're like, because this adds value to my world, I'm glad to outsource this service.
Yes.
So there are emerging means in the Bitcoin world to outsource certain aspects of this, not control of your Bitcoin, but means of securing it in a really redundant way. So that's where instead of paying a bank to say, you control all my money, oh, and by the way, you control basically how wealth is distributed and created in the world. Yeah. I'm instead outsourcing to a third party and say, hey, you're going to help me secure my Bitcoin in case shit goes down or I screw up as a person.
Right.
Some of those phrases, we're not going to go into them right now, multi-sig or multi-signature, where you're getting into services that would say for a transaction or for amount of Bitcoin to leave a wallet, you would need 2 of 3 available signatures, where one of those is outsourced to a third party. This is where you're getting into like really great redundant systems to protect your Bitcoin. There's also new entities emerging for insuring your Bitcoin in multi-signature environments. This is amazing. I believe the company Anchor Watch, like one of the first ones where like quite literally your Bitcoin is insured in a way. And of course you pay a premium in a way to do this, but that's on you as a person. Do you trust yourself to manage on your own, or do you find value in aspects of that centralization or aspects of a third party, right? And you can choose. And again, this is not 100% empirically true, but I'm going to bet with 99% certainty it is.
Yeah.
Most of the security issues with Bitcoin, most of people talking about losing Bitcoin, losing money, has nothing to do with the protocol itself or the mining process or any of those things. That is secure, that is safe, that is sound, it is well-oiled, and it's running.
Yeah.
Almost all of them, and again, I would bet 99.999 have to do with the individual.
Human error.
And human error and failing to understand how to properly secure Bitcoin, their wallet, their private key, the seed phrases associated. And while it is maybe... it's intimidating at the beginning. It's not hard. It's not hard. It's once you wrap your arms around doing so, you understand the options in front of you, and then you can move forward from that. And that's I feel like, again, not on this episode, but other multiple episodes that we might put together, is helping to dispel some of that notion. It's like almost like knowledge is power. Yeah. Through knowledge, you develop more options to take in.
And with wider adoption, there's more options.
100%.
So in the beginning, you're right.
100%.
Oh, that's okay. I said I would say like 14 times. But that's what's also cool is as this grows, as do the options on the human side.
Yes.
Not the Bitcoin side. That's going to stay as we discussed. But it's kind of like one of the things that I kind of like keep touching on is how, our individual experiences with this. And I said that in our very first episode, the Bitcoin mindset is about curiosity.
Yes.
And I have become more curious through this. This is another part of it, of like having to assume the responsibility of your investment. If it's on you, it's also your mistake. And that level of responsibility in this area, I think, has translated into other areas where it's actually invigorating to have to take responsibility as opposed to relying on somebody else. Risk has woken me up.
I'll build on your word of invigorating. And I think I can speak for both of us in this to say that wrapping your arms around the topic and both the pros and the cons being the risk, it's empowering.
Because
you realize you can champion it.
Yeah.
And go, oh my gosh, I'm on the other side. I now can do this well and I can do it properly. And now I have more options to avail myself of than I did before.
Once you kind of wrap your arms around Bitcoin and Bitcoin security, reconciling Copilot doesn't seem so scary.
Right.
So where before, it looked like this like dashboard. I was like, what now? What category? And now it's like, oh, once I kind of jump to the end of the line of something that's actually quite complicated, the other things in our financial system between you and I don't seem so scary.
I would agree.
I feel like a responsible party.
Okay.
So personal anecdote.
Hold on, I gotta look up some other stuff here. We're getting close to the close.
Yeah.
These are the final little tactical pieces of the episode. Then we'll recap, and there's some practical pieces at the end.
Okay, I do have something.
Finish the tactical. Okay.
I have a transaction tactical. It's on the exchange.
Yep.
You do have to take it off of the exchange and put it on to your wallet. Is that relevant information right now?
This is super relevant information. Because
I feel like a lot of people leave it on the exchange.
So super relevant.
Okay.
And especially it's closing out maybe this like wallet conversation for the moment.
Okay.
There is a difference between, or there is a nuance to wallet ownership, and in this case, Bitcoin ownership.
Yes.
So if, let's just say I'm one of you listeners out there, and you on your own volition decide, you know what? Sure, I'm going to go throw some money into Bitcoin. And for an illustrative example, we're going to use $100.
Okay.
So I go on Google and I'm going to start typing in maybe cryptocurrency exchanges, Bitcoin exchanges, and a very common one, at least in the United States, is Coinbase.
Yep.
I go to coinbase.com. I set up an account and boop, boop, similar to like a Schwab or a Merrill trading account. Now I have an account on Coinbase. I can load it with $100 USD, and then I can say, buy Bitcoin, right? Because remember, Bitcoin is divisible to the 8th decimal place. You don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can 100% buy $100 USD worth of Bitcoin, right? So at that point, sitting in Coinbase, and I've successfully, like a little, like, yaha, like a little thing goes off, and I'm now a Bitcoin owner. While yes, you have a quote unquote account at Coinbase, it's linked to your name, and yes, it's showing some Bitcoin in there. There is a phrase in the world of Bitcoin of not your keys, not your coins.
Oh, I was hoping that was going to weave into this.
Not your coins. So because this is a major exchange, they, at this point in time still, as the Bitcoin is resting in Coinbase, they are the ones with the private keys. So they are, at this point, are still the ones that truly control that Bitcoin. Now, yes, like
that's
legally,
intricate.
like right. It's like if there was ever like Coinbase shut down and you had $100 worth of Bitcoin in there, could you sue them and prove that you had $100 worth? Sure, but that's not, I think, even the premise of this. The premise of this is to say the moment you secure Bitcoin, you want to ensure that you control the wallet in which it sits. And what that means is you own and control and are the proprietor, the only person that has seen the private keys associated with that wallet.
So are you saying on the exchange you're utilizing their private key?
Well, you don't have their private key. You're using their public wallet.
Oh, you're using their public wallet, but they only have access to the private key.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's why you want to get it into your own.
Let's just go full conspiracy theory person on there.
Lean in.
Like they could be like, oh, so at that point, that means Coinbase could then totally rip me of my Bitcoin and they could do something with it. Technologically speaking, yes, you are correct.
Right.
Like at that point in time, not your keys, not your coins.
Again, that's something though that's on you.
So a standard security practice that future episode, again, we'll get into, is the moment you transact on an exchange, you would then transfer that Bitcoin from the Coinbase address to a different, public wallet, but one that you control the private key of.
Got it.
Let's say again, it's $100
You're taking it from
worth
their
of Bitcoin,
public wallet into your own public
and I say,
wallet.
"Hi, Coinbase,"
and you own the key.
So I'm saying, I'd like to transfer this Bitcoin to this, and you give them a big old string of letters and numbers to your public key, to my wallet. I'd like to send this Bitcoin to my wallet that I control, that no one else knows the private keys of other than me. I say, okay. And then boop, boop, the transfer goes. And then now the Bitcoin is sent from Coinbase to your wallet.
I think that I'm glad I asked because I think that's super relevant. I think it's kind of like picturing, I don't know if this is correct, but let's say I have a mailbox at UPS.
Yes.
And I get a letter to UPS. UPS doesn't have my P.O. box key,
Right.
but they have a key to the front door.
They have a key to the back door where they put the letter in.
And
right?
the back door.
Yeah.
So essentially, like, if I'm getting a letter, UPS is essentially Coinbase.
Right.
And my mailbox with my glass front that I have the key, I need to take it out of the UPS and put it in my own mailbox.
What I would say is here's why I really like the UPS example.
Yeah.
You're right. If you have a P.O. box at a UPS account,
Yeah.
right?
Or just it lands
So,
at UPS.
like you walk in and like you're seeing all these boxes with mail in it. And
Yeah.
like one technically represents your mail, but they have the key to the back door to put the mail in all the different slots.
Yeah.
Right. So they could easily, just as they put mail into those
can take
boxes,
it out.
they can take it out.
Mhm.
So the only way that you really secure your own mail is if you walk into UPS,
Yep.
you open your little box, you grab the mail out and you run back home.
Yep.
And now it's at my house.
Yep.
Right. That's
Okay.
essentially what we're talking about here
Great.
in doing so. So different episode.
Yes.
We will get into wallet. And I will say in our world, the last several years, this topic, how to secure your Bitcoin, wallets.
It's kind of the end
I
game.
have spent individual time with people, like sitting with them at a
Hours.
computer, like trying to so
Yeah.
there is definitely a market need in a way to spend more time on this. And it's not that you can't self-educate, but
If I was sitting here as a newbie and I knew how to do the security wallet transfers on my own confidently as much as I go to an ATM and take out cash from your credit card, I think that's a game changer. Like, I think most of the reason why people are skeptical is because that's a big part. The threat of loss
yeah,
and it's your fault
Yep.
is terrifying.
terrifying.
So if that is something that we can help illuminate and maybe even, I don't know, solves the problem, but empower others to figure
Yeah.
out, that's a huge part of the adoption
I
of this
agree.
whole thing.
Maybe that's even the next episode. Who
Mm.
knows? Okay, couple of last tactical
Let's
bits,
do
and
it.
then we're gonna close out. So I want to get into this is again. I won't, I guess I can call these conspiracy theories, but these are still the skeptics in the room that want to ask these like clickbaity questions that
Do it.
they've seen. Okay, so let's go back to Miner Bob.
Miner
And Miner Bob has
Bob.
a computer.
Sweet
And
minor
to
Bob.
mine, at least in today's land of 2025, you need specialized computers to mine.
Yeah.
In the olden days, 2009, you used to be able to use like your laptop or gaming laptops because they had enough processing power in them to mine. Now that's not really the case. There's so many miners out there that you kind of need specialized computers that are only built to really hash SHA-256.
Got it.
If any of you are in the world of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, you probably heard like ASICs, like ASIC miners. That's kind of a big thing. But the reason I bring this up is that Miner Bob
I know where you're
is
going.
not the only miner out there,
Right.
right? Miner Bob has a lot of buddies. There's
Mhm.
a lot of other miners out there in the world, a lot of other computers competing for that block reward, right? They all want that 6.25 Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say I'm Bob and I'm operating as a single miner for the
Mhm.
moment. But I'm like, you know what? If I get some help and I get some of my family members or people with me to pick up a pickaxe and we all add some more energy and power to this
Mhm.
by probability standards, I probably will extract more gold than other people. Or in this case, if I add more computing power, more hashing power to my little area,
Yep.
I have the probability of winning because I can make more guesses than other people can if they're going solo,
Sure.
right? What this would do theoretically, but again, Bitcoin has a solve for this. Theoretically, what that means is that an individual or an entity or a superpowered entity could put a bunch of computers together, a bunch of hash power together, and control Bitcoin to an extent. Because not only would they control 51% of the ledger, but they could just mine a bunch for themselves, right? And like
Right.
take it all down.
And I could see people going, well, humans are humans, so I'm gonna Miner Barbara. If I give Miner Barbara a puppy on
Mhm.
Wednesdays every week, and she loves dogs, okay, I'm gonna bribe Miner Barbara to get on my team.
Sure.
And I'm gonna bribe Miner John to get on my team,
Right.
and I'm gonna start to play on that
Human element, sure.
greed, which
Yeah.
has kind of gotten to where we are now.
Right.
And I'm gonna start bribing all my neighbors. And
I like the
I'm-
bribe with puppies. That would work for me for sure.
I
in a big way.
know. So
But here's what the Bitcoin protocol has built in.
Okay.
It's something called the difficulty adjustment.
okay.
So the Bitcoin protocol, and again, I'm speaking in generic terms, please don't judge me on these things. The Bitcoin protocol is able to measure or know how much total hash power is being used to try and mine Bitcoin.
Okay.
It's aware of that. and it adjusts the difficulty of that math problem based on how much power is in the system.
Okay.
So let's start low. Let's say there's in the early days of Bitcoin, when there's low hash power in the system, right?
Yep.
There's not that many computers or miners competing. It makes the math problem easier to win because there's not, right? To keep Bitcoin going, basically a block has to be mined about every 10 minutes, right? And so to keep that going, it makes the math problem easier to solve, essentially. And it's, again, I even struggle because I know the Bitcoiners would judge me so heavily on this. It's not even necessarily a math problem. You're aiming for a range, effectively, where the hash that comes out of the SHA-256 machine is within the range.
I remember
So what happens is it just makes the range really wide. So that if I plug something in, as long as I'm in the range, I've won, quote unquote, won the math problem.
And just to clarify, the range, so the hash that pops out the other side is a number, we'll call it just for the sake of this number. And if that number is between they've deemed a winner is between number 2 and number 8 if you're in that. So a wide range is between
2 and 2,000.
2 and 2,000. And then we're going to, so it can...
You can widen the range, right?
Narrowing the range makes it harder.
Correct. So
widening the range makes it easier.
Right. So widening the range means more probable answers are good and get you the mining reward. So let's
I'm glad you mentioned the range because I had thought about that actually.
So let's go back to our example of Miner Bob pulling all of his buddies together and thus increasing the available hash.
Isn't that clever?
What the Bitcoin protocol is able to do is it adjusts the difficulty, and in this case it increases the difficulty and it narrows the range. So it's a lot harder to get the right number. What this does is it sort of evens the playing field for everybody in the ecosystem.
That's so cool.
That way it's now, again, in this case, Miner Bob and friends, they still have a higher likelihood because of how many sheer number of people or machines that are mining towards it.
Yes.
But it's making it harder for them to win, right? And so in that hardship, right, that means the little machines are having to use a lot of energy, right? You have to keep gathering more people into your thing. So this is where, again, coming back into it's computationally really hard and thus really expensive to do this stuff, to play the game. This is where you're not only getting into Bitcoin being backed by actual energy, but long story short, the protocol is smart enough to not be outsmart by individuals that are coming in to do that. And I think the difficulty adjustment is, again, similar to proof of work.
Yeah,
it's one of the aspects of Bitcoin that's God, this is whoever Satoshi is beyond genius. Where you're just how did you think of all of these things? It's just truly marvelous. So here's the last one, and I love this one. Are
you gonna tie this to?
It's tied to kind of these conspiracy theories or people. Yes,
the buzzword.
The glass half empty people. Okay, so like I mentioned before, the nodes, right? All of those that are running a copy of the ledger, a copy of the Bitcoin core protocol. They're all working in a decentralized nature. And it's the consensus among them that sort of governs where Bitcoin goes. Another way of saying that is if you control 51% or more of the hash of the available computing power, you can effectively control Bitcoin. You can control...
Because you would be the 51%.
Correct. You're controlling the transactions that are going into the block, or multiple blocks in a row. Again, we're not going to get into all the details. All you need to know is there's something in this space.
Would that be I own 51% of the nodes?
In this case, it would really be 51% of the mining nodes.
The
is
mining
what it is.
nodes.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the other nodes who are just running copies, they're fact checking what the miners do correctly, but they're more just copies.
So
right? They're going to run whatever the mining.
50% of the mining.
Okay, 51%. But again, for you as a listener, all you got to know is majority rules. Okay,
majority
rules.
O'Doyle rules. Sorry.
So some would say, you know what? Large nation states, the United States, CIA, NSA, government. Oh, they hate Bitcoin. They're totally going to control it. They control it. They control Bitcoin. They're good to go. So,
sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
Well, but it is comical because here's why it's comical. So many are comfortable taking a soundbite like that and then shilling it out into the world as truth. And that really actually bothers me
Mm.
because there's been no effort done, no energy expended to try and understand what they're saying and sharing is factually true.
Yeah.
And especially when something is not factually true. That definitely bothers me.
Yeah.
And so, like in this case, what we would be loosely referring to is called a 51% attack.
Mm.
Common in the sphere of Bitcoin, right? But it's the attack assuming that you own 51% of the available hash to do what you will with Bitcoin. So, like I mentioned, though, Bob and his little pickaxe, or in this case, his computer that's mining, it takes energy to mine.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, Bob had to pay for the actual miner, the ASIC itself.
Mm.
So there is a cost associated with mining. So to own 51% of the hash is very costly. So into ChatGPT just this morning, I typed in, what would the theoretical cost be to perform a 51% attack? And you can go online, and there's actually a calculator, like a real-time calculator that looks at this. And the way it does is it reverse engineers the total available hash today, and then kind of the energy costs and like what it would take to get there.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read from ChatGPT here for a second. It says, this is current Bitcoin network hash rate. So as of recent data, the Bitcoin network's hash rate is approximately 517 exahashes per second. Again, we're not going to get into detail of an exahash versus not, but just know
it's
that's
a
how
lot.
much, 517. Okay. In addition, the hardware requirements to mine, for example, this one's called an Ant Miner S19XP, right? It says it offers a hash rate of about 140 terahashes per second. They alone, the Ant Miner, is $10,000 per miner, $10,000 USD per miner. Okay. So to achieve a 51% attack, or in this case, 51% control, you would need 264 exahashes, and you'd need 1.89 million mining units. Okay. So just the hardware cost alone, computationally, you're sitting at $18.9 billion. Billion with a B.
Okay.
Then there's the operational cost.
Okay.
So that includes the energy consumption. Each Ant Miner consumes about 3,000 watts of energy. So you're talking about 5.69 gigawatts. We're going to get into like why energy is such a big piece of Bitcoin. Assuming electricity cost of about 5 cents per kilowatt hour, you're talking close to $300,000 per energy, just in energy cost. Daily cost, so it runs for 24 hours, $6.83 million just in energy cost a day. So you're at roughly
all of the nodes. Miners.
To run the miners that you just bought.
Okay.
So you're at 19 billion in mining hardware. That's like in general, because you need to buy plunked in your 19 billion.
I'm following.
Then you need to spend approximately 7 million a day just in the energy. Mind you, where you get this amount of energy, it's like it's not like you just like plug in.
No, it's like
$19 billion worth of miners into your wall outlet. And it's available,
you can't steal the grid.
And actually, hold on. So we're gonna come back to
I didn't even think of that.
This is where did that go? So 5.69.
Yeah, where
gigawatts.
you get that much energy
hold on.
is a great
Not
point.
to mention, for all of these machines, much like you've all probably had your computer like overheat on you at times. You hear the little fan go on. It gets
so you
hot
have
on your lap,
maintenance costs.
So you have infrastructure costs.
Right.
Facilities to house and cool nearly 1.9 million mining units would require substantial capital investment and time. Supply chain constraints, right? Network response. So then I actually had ChatGPT said, can you please do a rough calculation for all those infrastructure requirements?
The network. Oh my God. Wi-Fi.
Okay, so hold on. Power consumption. Okay. The space and data center costs. So the space required is approximately 945,000 square meters.
Oh, Jesus.
The data center cost. Okay. So the cost per square. So it would take $945 million for the data center cost.
Okay.
So you're at 19 billion for the miners. You're at about 1 billion for the real estate. You're at $7 million a day. Let's see. The attack would require enormous power, equivalent to that of a small country.
Okay.
So you'd have to muster the power of a small country
a day
to power these things. Okay. The space required would be roughly the size of 165 football fields.
Oh my God.
And then it says, even if a nation state attempted this, the Bitcoin network could adapt to the counterattack. So the last thing I want to type in.
There's a couple more things that you threw into this that I loved when we were talking about it earlier. For those of you listening, he's just typing in calculations on his telephone.
Well, again, by no means is this like one of the only factors, but the fact that energy will be something that we talk about probably many times.
Yeah.
So the fact that, like, again, computationally it came back at 5.69 gigawatts. I would bet that most of you listening like have never really thought about like wattage and electricity.
Or have
like,
a reference point. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here would be the real world examples of like how much energy that is.
Okay.
It's the equivalent to millions of homes.
Okay.
So let's see. 5.69 gigawatts could power about 4.7 million U.S. homes at the same time. That's nearly the entire state of Colorado or half of New York City. For context, a large nuclear power plant generates 1 to 1.5 gigawatts.
Oh my gosh. So and you need 500 a day?
You need 5.69 gigawatts is like running 4 to 5 nuclear reactors at full capacity.
Oh my goodness.
Or the equivalent to 20 average size coal power plants. It's equivalent to the Hoover Dam. Hoover Dam generates 2.08 gigawatts at full capacity. So you'd be running 2.7 Hoover Dams nonstop. So at least for us as like those who are Bitcoin curious and interested in this as the best form of money, right? So the intent of this for a large nation state or something like that would be to get control of the Bitcoin network for one of two reasons. Either you want to control it to kill it, or you want to control it to be the beneficiary of all the Bitcoin that are coming as a result of the mining award. But in doing so, you're undermining the value of the thing that you're trying to control.
Exactly.
So that, like, for example, let's say in the absence of wanting to control it, like if you were really interested in benefiting monetarily, you'd just be better served taking the 19 billion plus 7 million and just putting it into Bitcoin. Like that alone would net you better results than spending that and now getting 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. But it's just funny because it really does it breaks down in terms of why you would do it in the first place. The only one, again, this is only in theory, that remains supreme is people to control it to kill it. That's the main thing, where it's like, nope, we're going to own 51% of the Bitcoin and we're going to fork it and destroy the currency, or maintain control of the currency and we're going to like use that moving forward. But like we said in this, part of the reason why we even wanted to start in this third episode, or kind of effectively like Bitcoin 101, is some of these news headlines, these clickbaity things.
Yeah.
It's so funny because it's so out of the normal realm of possibilities, right? Of doing any of these things.
I think like what we said earlier, that if these things are happening, bigger things are happening before.
100%.
Like think about that in just a calm approach of like, if we're at that point, think of the ramifications that are happening prior to that.
Like a nation state running 5 nuclear power plants to offset for a short, like, by the way, you'd have to run that concurrently to like try and take over this monitoring unit. And
there's a timestamp on it.
In that case, to me, I'm like, it actually is a big checkbox that like apparently Bitcoin got something right. Because if someone is going to that extent to maintain control, it's like they're controlling it because it has so much power.
Yeah.
So that's going to be, I think, the close to some extent of like both. Let's see, going all the way back to the start. Peer-to-peer electronic cash or digital gold.
Yep.
Right. We know that Bitcoin itself is really just a ledger.
Yep.
Right. There's a beauty in that ledger being decentralized over a number of nodes.
Yep.
We've kind of walked through mining and how Miner Bob is both incentivized to actually do some mining, which is just taking a bunch of transactions and putting them into blocks.
Yeah.
We talked about how blocks are linked into a chain because into that transaction or into what's hashed ultimately, we got to include the hash from the previous block, which is just muito bom, genius. We talked about SHA-256 and just like the sheer number of possibilities it presents, both from a mining perspective. We talked about wallets. We talked about private keys.
Proof of work.
So here's the last bit, and this is what we had talked about kind of closing with.
Yes.
For those of you, again, who knows how long this has been already, 2 hours-ish.
If you've hung in there with us.
You've hung in. Thank you, by the way, for your patronage. Sincerely appreciate it, because these are hard topics. I would like to imagine that anyone who's listening to this podcast probably has, and I'm doing air quotes right now, quote unquote, other investments in their world.
Yes.
Maybe they have a brokerage account with Charles Schwab or Robinhood or Merrill or Bank of America. Who knows, right?
Sure.
They have a brokerage account. Maybe they've purchased stocks or bonds. Maybe they have a 401k, a retirement account, an IRA, an individual retirement account, where they've tried to buy mutual funds or the S&P 500, right, or different things like that. I'm going to make a bet that most of us, even as practical investors, when we maybe said, you know what, I have a brokerage account, I'm going to buy a mutual fund, or maybe I'm even going to invest in the S&P 500, right? I'm going to buy just a large ETF of the S&P 500, and that's where I'm going to throw my money. At that point in time, that's practical investing, by the way.
And I would say most of the time you're hiring someone to even do that for you.
Potentially.
You're not doing it yourself.
But if you are doing it yourself,
sure,
that's the level of due diligence you've done. You're kind of like, oh, I've heard the S&P 500. Maybe I even loosely know those are the largest 500 companies by market cap. But I can almost guarantee none of us on a daily basis or a weekly basis are like thumbing through the P&L and the quarterly investment updates from these public companies. We're not looking at what was their profit, what was their loss, what was their tax strategy. We're not looking at their roadmap as a company. I was going to say,
what's on the horizon?
We're not looking at them being productive, right?
Yeah, what's the security like?
And the reason I'm bringing that up is this is the fascinating part, and maybe even the prickly part about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Why is it that individuals feel like they need to go to this level of analysis on Bitcoin as an investment object, yet all the other ones, it can kind of stop at like one step down? And that's, for those of you that are listening, I want to commend you on two things, which is, number one, you now understand more about Bitcoin than 99% of the people around you. Because this takes effort to understand. But in doing so, realize how in those other aspects, like around investments or things of that nature, we don't seem to require as much depth as we do around this topic.
No.
And I think
that's one of the most interesting parts of this for me too.
Equally in that, I think that's where what gets really motivating to me about this topic. And when you kind of like shake your world, and not in a negative sense, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean, like, wow, maybe many of us like have been a little asleep at the wheel in terms of what have I been putting my money into? Why have I been putting my money into the S&P 500? What gives me conviction and confidence that that is something that is deserving of my savings and capital that I've spent so many hours like moving forward with? And a lot of the reason, and I get it, it's okay to some extent, is like, you're like, well, I'm just listening to the world. I'm listening to practical knowledge that has been disseminated down from parents or friends and colleagues
or where
about
you work,
investing in the market, right? And this is how we do these things. And that's all well and good. But I guarantee you 99% of us as investors have never done this level of analysis on an object as we just did on Bitcoin. So that's the cool part, is you are walking away with a much more practical understanding of this. And now you have that knowledge to do something with.
Yeah.
You could do with something or nothing. It's entirely up to you.
Maybe it inspires you to go look at what your company's 401k actually is. And I think that's the other thing that we keep reiterating, of like, those aren't bad instruments. There are merits to all the instruments. Keep in mind, it's in the US dollar.
Yeah.
And like our last episode, we want to find something that stores our money so it stays valuable. Yeah. So, that's part of it. But I agree. I think it's comical when people come at Bitcoin questions with such ferocity and furrowed brows and an antagonistic perspective, when if you just kind of took a more objective approach and curious approach, you'd see maybe in other areas of your financial landscape, you don't do the same level of like, I don't know.
For those of you that are listening, and you kind of like have either like, you could even call back to like a moment, like again, in a conversation with somebody, or maybe you could even potentially put yourself in the situation sometime in the near future where you know that type of like friction will ensue from the topic of Bitcoin. I think that's my favorite part, is like when you can gently probe and ask people like what has brought them to that conclusion, what really makes them think the CIA or the government controls Bitcoin. And when you slowly unpack for that person that they actually really don't have as much knowledge as they seem to have, that's really uncomfortable. It's a really vulnerable state to like acknowledge like, oh wait, you're right, I kind of was leading with maybe a news headline and I didn't understand as much as I thought I did. But that's, again, one of my favorite parts about Bitcoin, not even just as a monetary unit and from an investment vehicle, but the level of curiosity it inspires for other aspects of life is so cool.
It's so cool. And I hate to go cliche, and this is my closing statement, and I get like emotional about it, which sounds silly in the beginning. But if you really think about what we're describing is an approach as a person to another person to be kind, to be aware, to be open-minded. I mean, these are attributes of what I enjoy about really solid human connection that I would say is kind of like a lost art.
Sure.
And that's when I keep saying the Bitcoin mindset is like, oh, doesn't that sound nice?
Yes.
And then you kind of go, oh, wow. Like the next time, even if it's a random subject of like, caffeine's really bad for you. And someone's like, no, caffeine cures cancer. It's like, hold on. Like maybe you can go, wow, is there something about caffeine I haven't considered?
Right.
And like, where did you hear that? I'd love to go look. Can you, and like, oh, this is what I heard. Maybe there's something. I just think it would be nice if that was if
that curious mindset was more how people led.
In all sorts of things. And it could be even down to anything. But I do hope that. I do wish. Same. I wish for that. I love that. I miss it. And on those rare occasions when I get it, I feel very fulfilled.
We did it. We did Bitcoin 101.
Yeah.
I think that was, and again, kudos for you if you're still here. That was a lot.
That was a lot
of intel.
But we knew that was coming. We knew our first 3 chapters, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3.
Yes.
Those were the foundational episodes. So if you've made it to the episode, end, congratulations.
Okay. Also, this would be really
going
fun.
forward, we'll now be a bit more bite-sized.
More bite-sized. And again, maybe wallets is the next place that we go for our next episode. For any of you who are listening, I will humbly ask if there were parts of this episode that you'd like us to go deeper on, or if you have just open questions,
perfect
like
spot.
Instagram, YouTube, or I don't know, text us if you have our phone number.
Yeah, because I need help. Knowing the content that would be valuable.
Most interesting and valuable to you all. 100%.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, if you have questions or you're like, could you explain this again? Like this didn't make sense. Oh, please do. That would just make the day.
Because we're a 2-man show. Well, all of this is done between the 2 of us. The video, the edit, the graphics, the
If you
Instagram,
want to come on to the
social.
show, by the way,
Sure.
and come have a conversation, like, hell yeah, raise your hand. We'd love.
One of our goals is actually, this is where I'm excited, because this is something that we haven't seen before. And I think Taylor said it one day, and I was like, that's the key, is that you can watch a lot of Bitcoin podcasts, and they're usually between Bitcoin experts, financial experts, a lot of people in that field. Guess what? We want to talk to people who are not.
Yes.
And see where those gaps are. We want our guests to be real people, but not experts. And I think there's gold in there, and
I think
we'll see where that goes.
It's bringing humanity back to the topic. It's not just about Bitcoin. It's about like people wrapping their arms around it, and if it may or may not have utility in their world. 100%.
Kind of like, there's no such thing as a stupid question. I would love to see what we learn from that. My only regret of that episode is we were talking about so many great like cryptology things. Yeah. And I wanted to use a National Treasure reference so bad. And I just couldn't get it in there. So insert National Treasure Nicolas Cage.
Maybe Nicky Cage could be a guest one day.
I don't know. There's just something about it. If you like that, I love those movies.
Wait, hold on.
I wanted it in
I'm
there.
totally going to steal this from us as we're
There wasn't
closing.
a moment. So that's my only regret.
My ideal guest.
It's honest. I really wanted to.
My ideal guest on the show, Jeremy Clarkson from Clarkson's
Farm.
Farm.
Oh my gosh.
I think like the random folks, that would just be such a fun dialogue.
I'd die.
He'd be incredible.
I would die. If you
It'd be a lot of
have
fun.
not become a Jeremy Clarkson
Go watch
enthusiast, he has
Clarkson's Farm.
skyrocketed to the top of my list. Clarkson's Farm,
Okay, so hold on. What else are we ending with that is not Bitcoin oriented?
Grand Tour, the boat episode in Cambodia.
It's so funny.
You'll die.
Go watch Clarkson's Farm. Go buy Seeger clothing.
Read
Western
Fourth
Wear.
Wing.
Go read Fourth Wing. And that's it. That's the Sunday episode.
Yeah, we did it. Sunday.
Until next time, folks, thank you for joining Two Hearts, One Bitcoin. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.